All right, everybody, welcome back to this is an exclusive on on philosophy for the people. And as Jim and I said before the show, let's get canceled.
This is our attempt to get canceled.
Yeah, so
The consequences of that are much higher for you, Pat. So
totally insignificant. I am notoriously uncancelable.
Yes,
We're gonna prove it today.
Right.
Now,
we're gonna find out, aren't we?
Yeah, we're gonna. That is a testable hypothesis, my friend. And
That's right.
And we're gonna talk a little political philosophy today. And look, it's gonna be different than people expect. I mean, look, obviously Jim and I are both very political people. We've got many political thoughts, but at the end of the day, it's neither very difficult nor interesting to just like go and like beat up whatever idiot politician is in charge, right? Like they're all rogues, they're all scoundrels. We know this. That's not impressive philosophy, right?
Whoever rules the city, says Plato, is going to be an uneducated fool. Right. It's
yeah. And so Plato made some predictions. We're going to see how those predictions have panned out. But before we do it, we kind of wanted to make this episode serve two functions, I think. One is we wanted to give our kind of, I guess, overview summary thoughts of the Republic. So this is sort of the fun wind up, if you will, after that long series that we've done, the 10-part series on the Republic. And then we want to, see what applications can be made to our modern political environment, which is very interesting, to say the least. So yeah, how's that sound, Jim?
Yeah, let's do it. Right.
Yeah.
We'd be I think we would be cowards if we didn't.
I agree. Yes. Yeah. Well, you made a point before we went on air backstage, and we will be selling backstage passes soon about how,
especially to the ladies,
about how at least for thinkers like Plato and Aristotle, to do metaphysics did require political philosophy, and to do political philosophy did require metaphysics. So why don't you start us off with that? Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. Well, and I think we said, part of this would be our personal big takeaways on this reading of the Republic, right? And by this reading, I mean, this is not our first time through it. And hopefully for the listener, there will not be just one time through this book. And you'll find every time you read something that is truly perennial, like the Republic, you're going to have a different major takeaway.
That's right. That's right.
And I've had, this has been a very stimulating read of the Republic for me. And I think I mentioned to Pat in an offline conversation is I've actually read the book 3 times this year because I reread it this summer because I decided to use it in a course I don't normally use it in. So I reread it. Yep. Right. And then while teaching it, I read it. And then getting ready for these podcasts, I read it. So in a fairly short order, I've read the book 3 times. And I tell you, I'm kind of want to go back and do it a 4th time right now. I mean, which
is impressive because I read it 1.5 times this year.
Yeah,
and you've read it more than I have for various reasons. And you're still reading it at a higher frequency than I am. So I have to catch up. But I just want to echo what you said. I mean, my main takeaway that is not hyper specific is just that when it comes to something truly perennial, obviously not just Plato, but we could say Aristotle, Boethius. I returned to Consolation of Philosophy this year as well.
That's a big book for you. Yeah.
Really good. Yeah, really good. There is always some new aha moment, a eureka moment, which we talked about. And it might be one that completely revolutionizes the way that you see the text.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I see Plato in completely like a 180 fashion of how I like first saw him, but I have definitely seen aspects of Plato's thought where what I originally thought Plato was teaching or trying to teach, now that's not so clear to me.
Yeah, amen to me. Yeah, my case too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in every instance, it's always richer. It's always more subtle. Richer. It's always more interesting. So, I'm not going to say like the mainstream interpretation is completely off on everything. However, I've certainly come to reconsider. I know a big one is like the theory of recollection, right? Is this like really meant to be a robust soul pre-existing the body basis for epistemology, or is he really talking about something like intuitions or having back pocket knowledge of things that we then later make explicit to ourselves, right? Stuff like that. So those are just some of the general themes of this time through the Republic. But
and so I've had several kind of real epiphany kind of moments in rereading it this time, and one of them is this notion of the connection between the political and metaphysical, right? And that and you might say that it's this Plato cannot transact his discussion of the ideal polis without discussing his theory of what is ultimate, right? And it's interesting though, he seems to be unable to like really articulate his theory of what is ultimate independently from that discussion of the ideal polis. Okay. And so it seems that for Plato, these are inextricable, right? They are two sides of the same coin, right? And because either way, when we're doing metaphysics, we're discussing order, right? What unifies the universe into a single order. And for Plato, what we're doing when we're discussing politics is order. We're discussing what puts the plurality of people into a single thing, into an order in the city, right? Yeah. And so, if order is said in many ways, right? Okay, but which is really what Aristotle would say, order and oneness in being are the same, right? Okay, so if being is said in many ways, certainly the being of the polis and the being of the ultimate cosmic order are not exactly the same thing, but they are analogously related. And you cannot, on the Platonic view, and I think the Aristotelian view, you cannot have a view of politics that does not reflect analogously your theory of being. And you cannot have a theory of being on metaphysics that does not reflect analogously your politics, right?
That's right. Yeah. And this clearly carries through to at least through the scholastic tradition as well.
Definitely.
And and one of the major issues today is that political philosophy is almost in no way informed by metaphysics anymore.
Right. Or maybe it has an implicitly nihilistic metaphysics, right?
Right. Yeah. Probably more correctly.
I think actually, I think a lot of what modern political philosophy is doing, I think you and I, some of the things we talked about planning for this podcast, this is going to be a theme, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But a lot of like what modern politics is doing is trying to operate under the illusion that we can have a political philosophy that is not implicitly a theory of being, right?
Yes.
And failing royally at that and not realizing how dark their theory of being is in virtue of those politics, right?
Right.
Right. I might even say that's much of what Nietzsche is doing, is to point out that inconsistency. But and so for me, that is one of my very big takeaways from this reading of the Republic, right? In that Plato, we've always known that you can't talk about the macro polis without talking about the micro polis. You can't talk about the city without talking about the person, right? The individual soul. But I also think that analogy then goes from the city up to the cosmos, and this is all one single discussion, right? And that's why Plato's theory of everything comes in a what has the surface presentation of a discussion of politics, but it's really a theory of everything.
And this is fortunately, I don't think I ever held the understanding that the Republic is meant to be like a blueprint for how to organize a society, right? It's not just like an early pre-draft of the Communist Manifesto, for example, right? First off, it's clearly not written, with the ability of a mediocre 10th grader, like the Communist Manifesto is. Right.
But in fairness to Marx, he was writing that to be read by like a bunch of like 19th century industrial workers, right?
Sure. Yeah. So maybe he hit his mark there, but the point is it's a large scale theory of everything, right?
Yeah.
And the emphasis on one of the big themes that I think that you hit really well throughout our series is when we're talking about justice in the Republic, we're talking about the meta virtue, right? So we have to get sort of even the traditional natural law understanding of justice. It's not wrong, but we have to understand Plato's going for something much higher, something much more overarching, if you will. What is the ultimate meta virtue? And that he calls justice. So you have to kind of make that category shift in your mind if you're going to appropriately understand what the Republic's after.
The excellence by which other excellences can come to be, right? Right.
Spot on. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so I think I also think this is kind of my dark takeaway from the Republic is on this reading of the Republic, I don't think I've ever really seen it before, is I think Plato is very, very skeptical, right, of that ideal polis ever coming to be, right, in the concrete world. And once again, that's why in the famous Raphael painting he's pointing up, right? It ain't here, right? It's not here. Okay. And excuse me. So and it does seem that I think it's very obvious he's skeptical of this as a concrete possibility in the real world. And that's why I think there's a question whether he thinks the philosopher ought to return to the cave. I think it's clear he doesn't think the philosopher has to return to the cave. There's a question whether he ought to at all. I think it's an open question now in the dialogue. the fact that the ideal cannot be realized in the concrete is a kind of it's a strange order of things, isn't it? You know, and you can see why Aristotle wants to smooth that out in a more coherent way in subsequent inquiry, right?
Sure.
But I do think it raises this really, really difficult problem for us is if we agree with Plato, whether we think he hit on the head what the ideal political ideal of politics is, and I think in a lot of ways in the dialogue he's admitting I don't think I've really gotten it because it sort of appears as just and isn't just. Okay.
Yeah.
But supposing he even got it, if we do believe we live in a disordered polis today, then can we have ordered souls within a disordered polis? Right. I think for me that's like the $1 million question that the Republic is forcing on me. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like can we indeed maintain the order in our souls in a republic that is disordered, right?
Right.
If indeed, you know, there's an intrinsic connection between these, and we're sort of dependent on the polis to make us just. Now, Plato seems to think you don't. Like you don't know, you make yourself just. You don't know the polis. Anything, go about your business. Aristotle thinks you are dependent on the polis to some degree.
Yeah. Right, and that's an even deeper pessimism because somebody might have the pessimism where they might think, well, look, you know, I can still, you know, pursue the excellent life and maybe even achieve it to some extent. Yeah. But yeah, we're never going to get an excellent polis. We're just not, right? And they could be pessimistic about that. This is a deeper pessimism in the sense that can we even have individually well-ordered souls if the polis itself is not well-ordered? And that is what is haunting Jim.
That's what's haunting me.
That's what's haunting Jim. That's what keeps him up at night.
In fact, it does.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think anyone raising kids should be.
No, dude, it keeps me up at night, man. Because I mean, look who we've got in charge here.
Exactly. Look at our options.
Look at our options. We got A and we got B, right? And look, again, I'm not gonna make fun of Biden too much. We all know he's a scoundrel. Anybody who's followed his political career knows this. I mean, everything about him is as phony as his academic career, including his Catholicism. And you know, I don't want to be one to be known for telling tales outside of school, Dr. Jim, but I've heard there's a few hot rumors going around recently that he may have also lost control of the southern border in more ways than one.
Exactly. Yeah, there are those rumors out there.
Now those are unsubstantiated.
Unsubstantiated.
But whatever you think of the alternatives, right? I think it's undeniable that this is far, far, far from a philosopher king that we have.
Yeah, exactly. So let me come back to Brandon in a second here.
Yeah.
Pardon me, Biden. So like I guess part of this, and this is getting us into some Aristotelian politics, in which I think down the road we're going to get neck deep into that. But one thing is I have to remember is what the Greeks mean by the polis, the city, and like literally they're talking about a small town here, like what we would see as a small town. Like Athens is not a huge place, right? And
an important thing to remember.
Yeah. And so like one of the things that like Plato and Aristotle would say if they looked at our political situation is like, why the hell do you think people, when you sit in Kansas, people in California have anything to do with you?
Yeah.
Right. And Aristotle will get into like the difficulties of having common political commonalities across geographic stretches and things like that. And he doesn't recommend it. Right. Yeah. Okay. And so like this to me is like the hope is like, what is it to have a polis? Right. Well, it's probably not a modern nation state.
Yeah.
Okay. At least not if you think that's what it is, you're equivocating on what's meant with the Greeks. Okay.
Right.
So is it a household? I mean, that's certainly a living component of a polis, right? Is it a neighborhood? Yeah, it's certainly a living component of a polis, right? Is it, being on the school board of your parish Catholic school, right? I mean, like that level of political institution is much closer to what Plato and Aristotle have in mind.
Yeah, right.
And is there still a possibility of there being a common deliberation about the good life, right? Wherein we could arrive at a shared notion of the good life based on a shared notion of the ultimate order of things. I think there's much more optimism about that.
I agree. Yeah. So it depends what the scale is for sure.
What the scale is. Yeah. And so like, maybe it's just that we have to look at like, and this is much of Alistair McIntyre's upside political recommendations, right? Is to quit thinking of your political identity on a national scale.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
I mean, how can you even do that? I mean, you just compare like what the average person in Portland believes right now to the average person in Alabama. I mean, they're living in two different worlds, man.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Like their way of life, everything, like the way they make a living, all those things are just too different. They're too different, right?
Right. Yeah. Religion, if they even have one.
Yeah.
You know, like every major social issue, right? They're probably black, like literally black and white on, right?
Literally black and white on. Yeah. And so, but then there is this question though: is like, can I have a meaningful metaphysically grounded politics with the people in my direct vicinity, right? But also though, that also means I have to actually be involved with people in my direct vicinity and not just people on Twitter, right? Okay, so there's that too. Like okay, and so I'm pessimistic in a lot of ways. Okay, Plato's because about this question of like, can we have a good soul when we live in what I think is a disordered polity? In as much as I can't keep that disorder from seeping into me through electronic means, of course we're using them right now, right? Then I worry about that. Okay, but also I can build legitimate political deliberative community with the people in my immediate vicinity if I get off my ass and do it.
Right.
Yeah. So like, hey, when's the last time you went to a parish council meeting, right? Okay, like when's the last time you went to the school board meeting for your kids? Like when's the last time you went to parent teacher conferences? When's the last time you threw a block party? Like when's the last time join a jiu-jitsu gym? Do all these things where you're going to be involved in like real, in Aristotle and Plato's sense, political deliberation with people. That's a different question, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. So sort of large scale pessimism, maybe small scale optimism seems like this could work, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, like when I think about our country as a whole, I'm very, very pessimistic. But when I think about my just little local community here in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, it's for the most part decently organized. I want to say like. Yeah. It's maybe not an aristocracy per se.
We haven't declared the guardian class, okay?
Right, we haven't got the guardian class yet, right? But I like where I live. I enjoy the people I'm around with. We have similar values. We have similar tastes and things. We get together and have many good, wholesome community events. The parish is thriving, in fact. So yeah, on the smaller scale, things actually aren't so bad. And I actually have to remind myself of that a lot, right? It's like essentially every time I get off Twitter, I have to remind myself of that.
Yeah. And the thing is like that sort of thing is more like what Plato and Aristotle have in mind by politics. Right?
Yeah, of course.
Right. Okay. The idea that you would have politics with people you didn't know was like they didn't quite get that, right?
Yeah, and even we talk about the scale thing. I mean, just the idea of a state, the size of a state now, even compared to what even just our founding fathers would have thought about it, is pretty ridiculous, right? So you don't even have to, this is not an outrageous notion. It wouldn't be outrageous just to Plato and Aristotle.
Yeah, no, I think the founders clearly thought you would know your representatives, like you would know these people.
Yes, right. Yeah,
and so, but kind of going back to the Viking helmet guy.
Yeah, let's take a look here. Yeah.
So let's put the footnote that this is write it off. Like if you like the question we're asking, like what does Plato think of these guys, right? Well, there's a footnote right there. Plato would say, quit thinking about your life on a scale that human lives are never meant to be ordered to, right? Okay, on this like continentally, like on this transcontinental political scale, like Plato would have been very, very dismissive of the very idea of that in the first place, right?
Yeah.
But also, so on the one hand, I think, but let's just kind of do a Platonic analysis of what's going on, since January, right?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So certainly what went on January 6th, Plato would have had a deep loathing for that, right? An absolute deep. There was a real lack of order going on there, right? Okay, right? That was a real lack of order. Right. And he would have looked at that and said, see what democracy gets you. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what I mean?
Well, right there, let's be clear, because throughout the series, people have suggested or even asked, is America an oligarchy according to Plato? And I think both our response was obviously not, right? At best, I think the Platonic diagnosis is we're democracy at best.
Yeah. Or I might actually say, I I I think so. So I think Plato would look at like he would loathe this. He would loathe the idea of of basically the merchant and agricultural class showing up and wrecking stuff, right? Okay. Uh, you know, okay. Now, and whether or not it's like false flag or it was that's not he doesn't care, right? But I also think he would say this democracy, small d, that you got yourselves into, guys, is a product of the oligarchy of which Joe Biden is like a card carrying member.
Yes, right.
Like I think what Plato would look at this is, yeah, this is what you get when you have an oligarchy, right? Like what? Because like let's where does Viking helmet guy come from, right? Well, this is a guy I've not met the man, who knows, right? But
we're gonna do a little speculation here.
Yeah, this is probably a guy who realized, at a certain point, his life is a rigged game, right?
Yeah.
And then he's been like told to do.
He had his eureka moment on Reddit. Yeah.
Yeah, he had his eureka moment on Reddit, right? And realized his life's been a rigged game. That he's been like what he can make and what his profession is and all that stuff has essentially been decided for him, right? And he, although he was told he's capable of self-government, and like the point of our polity is self-government, right? You making your free choice about who you are want to be. They've realized no, that indeed, whether it's January 6th or it's Occupy Wall Street, a bunch of people realize, no, we have a very, very, very rich and powerful oligarchy that's basically rigging a game, right, for good or ill for everyone else, right? You see what I mean? And then once think of like what Plato does in Republic, once oligarchy has been revealed just as oligarchy, period, right? The inequality of it will be intolerable, right?
That's right. That's when the resentment kicks in.
The ressentiment is going to kick in, right? And you're going to get, whether it's Occupy or it's January 6th or it's burning down the inner cities the cities in general, just in the summer of 2020, all that stuff, right? I think Plato look at all of that as yes, here, friends, is the fruit of oligarchy.
Yes. Right? And it is democracy. Yes.
Yeah. It's going to lead to democracy in this bad sense. Yeah.
And democracy, there's one category in there that I think just deserves specification, is a narco tyranny, right? And that is what we have seen, right? And narco tyranny is when the overlords allow anarchy for the purposes of political agenda and maintenance of power, right?
Yeah, because basically what you have now. Okay, so let me come back to that in 1 sec. So on the one hand,
you keep going. You're on a roll, brother.
So I'm going. Preach it, bro. Preach it, brother. And so I think what you have going on here is, okay, so this is very much Plato too. Is the political constitution reflects the value, like the highest good, what's taken as the highest good of that polity, right? So if you have a democracy, what you're saying is the most important, the best thing in life is honor, right? Okay, if you have an oligarchy, you're saying the most important, best thing in life is money, right? But then when an oligarchy is revealed as oligarchy, right, you're admitting like everybody but this small minority of oligarchs has what really makes life dignified.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all when you make the system worshiping mammon, right? Okay, and then you reveal, right, that indeed, like, the mammon getters have rigged the system, you're going to get resentment.
That's right.
You see, it doesn't even matter if like the overall standard of living is pretty good or very good in our case. The fact though is that you've hooked dignity to wealth, and you've like allowed people to like really hog up all the dignity now. Right? You see what I mean?
Yeah, well, of course, and this is one of those things where the proof is in the pudding, right? Because people will say, well, look, yes, there's inequalities, but everybody is a million times better off now than they were 100 years ago, certainly 500 years or whatever. But it doesn't matter, right? It is once oligarchy has been revealed and those inequalities are there, and nobody can deny that there's not only inequalities, but enormous inequalities, right, in wealth. Even if the overall standard of living is far better now than it has ever been, you're not going to avoid that. I like how you brought in the Nietzschean term resentment, right? Resentment, and then comes the inevitable slide from oligarchy to democracy, just as our dear friend Plato predicted, right?
Just as he predicted, and there it is. And we're seeing and once again, it's many-headed, right? It's like Medusa, right? It's like the Hydra. So you've got a BLM version of it, you got a January 6th Trumpist version of it, right? You've got the Occupy version. These are all different, right? They're all kind of they have different political ideological manifestations, but they're all ticked because we've said prestige value dignity is this thing, and then one small group of people have it, and they're dealing it out to others seemingly arbitrarily, right?
Right. And it's funny how they will, even though if they start off the heads of the Hydra almost completely ideologically opposed, it's funny that like once they hit their point of futility, they almost merge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I know commentators who were like at Occupy Wall Street that like became Trump supporters. Right?
Tim Pool's a great example.
He'd be one of those guys.
Perfect
right?
example.
Yeah. Just because of everything you're talking about, they finally like kind of like get the meta picture, if you will, right? Yeah. So it started out as like a specific anger, thinking it's just like one particular party or person, but they're like, no, it's far worse than that, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's deeper than that. It's deeper than that, right? Mm-hmm. And this is something that Aristotle does in the Politics. He basically says, look, once you get oligarchy, what you're going to get is the oligarchs are each going to like have their own like section of the demos they can like motivate, right? So you're going to get like the oligarchs are going to be having almost like a parlor game of war against each other to see who can get a bigger piece of the 99%, right? Mm-hmm. By how they can best play the little people off of each other.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, so it's like you're going to have like your oligarchs, behind their gated communities, all going to the same, like country club, laughing up with each other, right? Well, meanwhile, they've got like, it's one like it's Antifa versus the Proud Boys in the streets being manipulated by different oligarchs.
That's that's absolutely right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. And meanwhile, right, like we're sliding to tyranny. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That slippery slope is in fact a water slide. High speed, baby. High speed. Yeah.
High speed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that is not a pretty picture. Plato, obviously, how Plato predicted this should be clear for anybody who's been paying attention to our series. We just wanted to kind of paint.
There it is.
Yeah. Like it's just like in real time, right? Like amazingly.
In case you weren't doing the math on your own, here it is, friends.
Yeah. Right. All right. So I mean, like, can we get in some notes of optimism here? Like, what do we do? Right? Like, what can we do? What can be done here? Is Brandon out of control? Do we have to hope that Viking helmet rises again? that this has to like has to like play it, or just like it like the system of modernity just has to play itself out right to its inevitable horrible consequences, and then it will explode, and then maybe if it starts afresh, we can try again. Is that the only hope here? I hear for the first time. I hear for the first time in my life people that I never thought would, because they were just like such like proud patriots, like seriously being advocates for secession and stuff like this, right? So maybe it doesn't all have to explode, people say, but we do need a national divorce. Seems to be something that is becoming like increasingly popular among a lot of people. I see this on the left and the right. People saying, let's just break it up, guys. This is not. So
I mean, maybe transcontinental. Well, and the thing is, like, by breaking it up, I mean, do we mean like literally like breaking it up, or do we mean like returning to something more like what some people think the founding vision was, right?
Yeah, a proper federalism.
A proper federalism, right? That might be it. I don't know, right? But I do think though, we cannot continue to be run as an oligarchy, right? And I don't know how that go, how we get out of that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Right. And I think it's also important to understand that the notion of a tyrant isn't like necessarily literally Hitler. I mean, Biden quite well would fit Plato's notion of a tyrant, right? Yeah. Like he definitely would, right?
Yeah. He's found a way to become, to play on, the atavistic anger and desire of enough of the appetites.
The worst of people's appetites. Exactly. Right. So the tyrant isn't necessarily who just coerces you by gunpoint all the time. It's somebody who kind of controls and manipulates you because you're just so degenerate. Right.
Yeah.
And certainly those conditions have been met. Right.
Right.
So yeah, I see some questions that come in. If you're doing questions, let's just keep them related to Plato's Republic, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. We do general Q&A every Freaky Friday.
Every Friday, man.
Every Friday we get freaky. Jim, what are your thoughts? Are we missing anything else here in either our summary or application to modern times before we turn to some questions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wish I had something more like a positive political recommendation, right? Okay, but I do think though, um, this does get better. So like I'm gonna say, look, like Fox News and CNN or Fox News and MSNBC, whatever, right? I generally do see these as different attempts of the oligarchy to like sort of marshal, right, their people into this thing, like to do their bidding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I do think the degree to which that we, you know, quit worrying about what is furthest from us and begin to worry more of what is closest to us, right? In like Heidegger's terms, like so quit mediating our lives through technology that is taking our concern and putting it into things that have very little to do with our actual real lives and the actual real people in our lives, right?
Right. And that we have almost zero practical
Yeah.
influence over, right?
Influence in, or maybe even like almost no real skin in the game with, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? In as much as like that is like working, that like our attention, like literally these things want our attention, right? They thrive by our attention, right? And in as much as we're giving them our attention, we are falling into the hands of the oligarchy that is like manipulating us. Okay.
That's right. I mean, what's going to be more impactful, your complaining tweet or actually going to your local school board meeting?
Yeah.
And of course to ask the question is to answer it, right? But what do most people do these days? They make the complaining tweet. They do not go to the local school board meeting.
Yeah.
Right?
Got him, man. I made the tweet, man. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
He might not have even read it, but that doesn't matter. I did it, man. I called him out, right? Okay.
Right.
And so I think like that's to return to reality. It's to live in a real grounded, rooted earth, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's at least where we have to begin. I'm not saying that it's going to make everything better, and we're not going to have a nuclear war or something, right? Okay, but I do think if there is a beginning, right, it is to return to the real, not the hyper real illusion that the oligarchs are throwing up on the wall of the cave, right?
Yeah.
Like think of the image of the cave. Like who are the people with the sticks and the puppets in the cave? It's the oligarchs, man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the oligarchs that are giving us images that they want our attention to have, right?
Right.
And we need to turn away from those images and look at something real.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful. All right. Do I have any other thoughts on the state of affairs? Well, yeah. I mean, because so much of it too is again, how do I live a just life? How do I live a good life? And obviously, thinking about what Jim just said, you're gonna have a better life if you get your own house in order first, right? Your own domestic polis, if you want to call it that, right? And then your local, the things you actually have influence over, rather than, of course, just building a bunch of steam pressure in your spleen by being on social media all the time, with the, of course, exception of tuning into our informative live streams.
Exactly.
Yeah,
of course. Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
Do continue tuning in the Pat Flynn Show.
Yeah, of course. Always have to carve out reasonable exceptions to general rules, as we know. Yeah.
But I mean, I think this does though show that like we can't have this sort of no tech attitude, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because look, I mean, like you and I have become friends, and I think in a legitimate, like ameliorative way, right?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
And we've met once in person,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. And it was a fine time.
It was a fine time. I mean, the party was great, right? Okay. Right. The bruises have all healed now, but
that's right.
but yeah, I mean, so that's not the point. The point isn't like whether, I mean, certainly screen time can be overdone, but the point though is my focus of concern in the real, right? Or is it in the illusory real that the oligarchs want me to be attentive to, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the key thing. That's the key thing.
Excellent. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Dang, I got to get back to finishing Politics of the Real now by Schindler's new book. It's just it's sitting right over in the shelf over there. So,
well, it looks like on Philosophy for the People, we're going to be doing a pretty deep political dive, right? So,
which is good, man, because you made the point at the beginning that these. All philosophy is interconnected, right? You start asking questions in one area, an itch comes up in another area. So you kind of have to be a generalist to be a good philosopher. Yep. And it is very interesting because one of the earliest branches of philosophy that got me interested at a very young age was political philosophy. But it's something that I actually have ignored significantly for many years, just because you get so sucked up into other branches and stuff like that. So this will be good for me to come back into that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What got me was a course on political thought that I took as a freshman before I got kicked out of school. And it really, that's what hooked me. That's really what hooked me in philosophy.
Yeah. Right? You see, for me, it was, I was kind of, I actually grew up in a pretty conservative area, but I was kind of like the outcast liberal guy. I guess I just hate being in the majority wherever I am. Like, that's just my natural inclination. Right.
I'm the same way.
But then, like, even at a young age, most of the liberal paradigm seemed like pretty nonsensical to me. But then libertarianism very much attracted me. Right. Yeah. So like early high school, I just like got sucked into the world of libertarianism and libertarian thought, and that just, of course, made me really interested in philosophy. There were other things I was reading that got me super interested in philosophy too, but that was a big angle in for me. Yeah. Now, I've rejected a lot of that philosophy in the broad sense as I've developed, but it was a strong entry point for me.
Yeah, and had you gone back in your maturity now, like revisit all those issues,
yeah. I mean, the thing is like there's still certain libertarian thinkers that are very bright, and unfortunately, people read all the dolts. Like people read like Ayn Rand and like it's just like
Bob Nozick, man, read Nozick.
Yeah, you got to read Nozick, right? Yeah. You gotta, I mean, like even Rothbard. I mean, he's terrible in natural law. So like, if you just stick to him to his like economic thought, he's really interesting. I don't agree with him, and you kind of like. You're willing to separate the good from the bad with Rothbard. He's definitely still worth reading. Yep. But even like somebody like David Friedman, who was Milton Friedman's son, he's got a book called The Machinery of Freedom. So there's like or even what's his name? Michael Humer. He's an anarchist himself. Yeah. He's got the problems of political authority. So there are good either definitely libertarian or like libertarian-ish thinkers out there that on the popular level, people who call themselves libertarians seem to just be like totally like unacquainted with, which is a shame.
And like you and I in our professional work, in grad school and beyond, right? Much more oriented to the metaphysical philosophy of mind, stuff like that. Yeah. It's going to be very constructive, like return a lot of stuff, right?
Right.
And for instance, next semester when I teach my philosophical psychology course, we're going to start out, we're going to read Aristotle's De Anima, and then we're going to read the first book of Aristotle's Politics to see the deep connection there.
Right? Nice. And
then we're going to read Descartes and Hobbes on mind, right? Mm-hmm. And then read Leviathan, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're going to read Merleau-Ponty like on phenomenology of perception, and then look at one of his political writings, and you can see the intertwined nature of all these texts.
Yeah, if we do another series, which I'm sure we will down the line, Mortimer Adler's 10 Philosophical Mistakes does a great job of showing those connections as well. How political philosophy kind of, in more or less, always kind of trails or lags behind these, how people are thinking about the grand scheme or human anthropology, all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, or if Plato's right, it might be the other way around. The metaphysics lags on.
It could, certainly, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Yeah, we should do 10 philosophical mistakes at some point. Even just a chapter or two would be cool with that. Anyways, I'm rambling. Should we do some questions?
Let's do it.
All right. Any questions related to Plato's Republic or Brandon, please drop them in the comments. Catholic Base said, you said almost perfect regarding Plato's predictions. So what do we think Plato got wrong? Did Plato make any inaccurate predictions, Jim? What do you think?
Inaccurate prediction. That's interesting. I think predictively, I'm not quite sure where I think, like, given the predictions we would make about, well, I guess we don't know. Okay, so basically, what I see the American polity is this: it's a democratic republic, which, from a Platonic standpoint, is an oxymoron, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so Plato would predict that that's going to fail, right? It's just not going to work. Okay, and I don't think thank God, I don't think we know if he's right about that yet. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I mean? Like, so we'll see if we make it, right? We'll see if we can keep this.
Yeah, there seems to be kind of mounting evidence in his favor, but we'll see.
right, yeah, exactly. But we'll see if we can make this thing stick. If we can, then he was dead wrong over that, right? But we'll see. Okay, now, some things that, like, other things. I think there's plenty of things I don't agree with in the Republic. Now the question, are they things that Plato takes seriously or not? It's like the whole bit about, we're gonna, like, if what we thought was a menopausal woman has a baby, we're gonna kill it, right? Things like that. Some of that stuff, I think it's in there to be absurd, to show like what idealization would really do to politics, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it would lead you to do crazy things because we don't really have the ideal at our behest in this life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of like the crazier stuff in the Republic, Plato intends as crazy, right? Because he admits to Glaucon, well, yeah, of course we're not going to do this, couldn't do this, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I think like Aristotle's not disagreeing with Plato on the politics. He's like, when he says, well, it's not about the ideal, it's about what we can actually do, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, but I think there is in book 10 where Plato gives the example of the couch, and it's interesting. He picks an artifact for his example, and he says,
I feel like it was a table. I feel like it was a table.
It's a table, maybe, yeah. And it's a piece of furniture, right? And so, there's the ideal of it, and then there's what the carpenter knows of it, right? And then there's what the artist knows of it, right? And it's interesting. So Plato basically says like what it is to know something would be to know what it would be to make it, right? Like for him, then like it seems like the essence is something like what you would have to know to make something, okay? And a lot of people think that this begins like the march of technology. It's like the
technological nihilism. Yeah,
it begins with that right there, okay? And I wonder about that. Okay, I wonder about that. Like are we thinking about essences as like engineering, schematics? And is that, in that case, does that indeed like dispose us to think of the world as something that
that's interesting, because a subtle twisting of the words there can really reframe the question, like what it is to make something, or what it is to make something to be what it is. You see
exactly
what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And certainly an essence is for something to be what it is, right? Because the essence test is like, if you keep kicking things out, eventually you'll kick something out where that thing is no longer that thing anymore. Now we've hit something essential, right? So that's got to be right. But yeah, it's definitely not this sort of engineering schematic. I like how you put that.
And so like for Heidegger, like that very ambiguity that you bring in there, he thinks is there, and it's like, which way should we take this? And he thinks that ambiguity is always operative in the tradition, in the metaphysical tradition, and then ultimately like leading up to Hiroshima, right?
Right. I love the cartoonish simplifications that actually might be accurate in analyses like this, right? I know. It usually lands on Occam, right? Especially among like Thomists, right? But no, we're going all the way back to Plato with this,
No, Heidegger thinks like someone like Occam is like the final nail in the coffin, right? Nominalism, the final nail in the coffin, right? But he thinks, and it's not that he's blaming on Plato, he just thinks there's an ambiguity that starts there, and it's always present, and it gets exploited in the wrong ways.
Beautiful.
So
awesome.
I worry about that.
Second question from Catholic says, Jim says Plato has a political pessimism. Should we adopt that lens today? I think we kind of already answered this, Jim, at the beginning, but if there's anything you want to add to it, go for it.
No, I have nothing to add to it. I think we got it.
Okay, cool. All right, Meow, I see you have a question about divine simplicity. That's a wonderful question, but save that for next week. What is it? Next week, Thursday? I think we're going to be jamming with Gavin on a Q&A on all that stuff. So
nice.
Hold on to that. Brendan says, could you describe the key differences between the founding structure of this country and what we have now?
Man, that's big.
A little above my pay grade too.
And it's an open question, because some people would say, no, we have, like, we're actually just getting it right finally now, or something like that. Okay, so I think I've got some names in mind. I think we should bring a good political scientist on.
That would be good.
Like a seriously good reader of the Federalist paper. I have someone in mind that
I will simply say, when I read the relevant documents back in the relevant times, the portrait that is painted then just seems so radically different than what we have now. So radically different, right? And I would just encourage everybody to do that. I mean, those are big, like, read the Federalist Papers, then do what I'm finally only doing recently, which is reading the anti-Federalist Papers, which you can get those too. And you'll just see, no matter which you read, it's just so radically different. Not just in terms of like, yes, we've advanced technology, but just like the conceptual frameworks that people are using.
And what you're reading in that debate is, like, what's the big worry is faction, right? The big worry is Plato's worry, right? The big worry is, how are we going to have a unity, right? In this plurality, right? Out of many, one, right? I mean, that's the motto. And Plato's, and not just Plato, then like Aristotle and the whole classical political tradition they'd be very skeptical about the idea that you're gonna go bottom up to that, right? And the American founding is a democratic republic. It's an attempt to do both, like to have a top down, bottom up, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the original actual practical structures of it were different, and that you had much less in the way of direct democracy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and understanding the pessimism and the wanting for limitation, I think, always just speaks so strongly against the nonsense, mostly liberal
Yep.
ideas of this code. Like
Yep.
like the Constitution is a living, breathing document. Like that proposal just always smacks as complete nonsense when you understand the historical context that our country was
Yeah.
founded on. I mean, like, like we're trying to get away from a system of organization where there was just this kind of like literally living, breathing, but nothing written down. Right?
Yeah.
Right. That was part of the issue they were trying to solve. So like, let's get this written down and binding, right?
No one ever wrote one down before.
That's exactly what I'm saying, right?
Like in Britain, there's no absolute written constitution,
and that was that was part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, in that sense, I think it's important to keep in mind. But yes, we will get a bona fide expert on here at the channel to do more of this stuff if you guys are interested in that. I mean, I'm really interested in that. I mean, my understanding of American history, I realize the more I actually read of it is incredibly deficient, right? Another one that we should do, which I've considered a lot now, was it's a spicy question, but I think an important was the revolution justified? Because I'm leaning more and more towards no. I don't think it was actually. It happened now, and we have obligations to our country and our patriotism, but was it justified at the time? Yeah, interesting question.
I mean, but was there any like good founding of any nation ever? Probably not, right?
Indeed, very. I mean, I know like some people want to never. We're not going to get into it. We'll stay here. Callum says, "How important is philosophical anthropology to politics? Is it crucial?"
100% crucial.
Oh yeah, I would say so. Yeah, Jim, why don't we outline some of the reasons why we think that is?
I mean, it's just that what we've talked about it, in that in like what is politics? Politics is, sort of negotiating.
It's the affairs of men. It's the affairs of men. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's the affairs of men. It's like the negotiating of the distribution of goods among humans, right? Well, then, what is and isn't good for a human, right, is going to be a really, really big.
Depends on what a human is.
Depends on what a human is. Yeah, so I think. And once again, I think every single politics has an implicit metaphysics and anthropology, and I think every metaphysics and anthropology has an implicit politics.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, like, this is why, like, if you want to make Pat Flynn triggered, which is kind of hard to do, but it gets easier with the years. I was like, just as I like say I'm uncancelable now, I was like untriggerable like 10 years ago. Now I seem increasingly triggerable. Like, just have those platitudinous, idiotic yard signs out there. Love is love. Science is real, right? Like, this is so reflective of the idiocy of our culture and sort of the implicit nihilism that Jim is talking about, right? Like, okay, thank you for the tautologous slogans, but what do you mean, right? We agree, like, people want to say, like, you should just love people, but if love is willing the good of somebody, we have to know what that somebody is and what their good actually is before we can talk in any meaningful sense about what loving behavior or loving action is, right? So it's just the superficiality of so much of political discourse that just infuriates me. It's like constantly at the level of sloganeering,
Or even if the denizen of the home sporting that sign had like a sort of a theory of love that the sign confirmed, right? Or that it was an expression of. The assumption is that theory of love is not itself optional, right? That it's indisputable, that there couldn't be debate among rational parties about that, right? And I think there's either this like just unreflective thing going on, or there's this really, just dogmatic assumption that every reasonable person sees the world the way I see it.
Yeah. Right? Such a political arrogance out there too. It happens to me all the time. Like, people will just be talking to me in a way like to just assume, because I guess I come off as somewhat educated, that I must agree with them politically and everything.
Since you're not running around in a Viking helmet, you must clearly not.
And they're actually often quite surprised when Pat Flynn, who has no qualms with telling people I think they're an idiot to their face.
Right.
Generally politely, but like, it's like this arrogance of these assumptions, but then also like this great surprise when somebody like doesn't agree with them, right?
And I think one of the things that like would really bother Plato about what we're doing today, and I think any classical thinker, right, is okay, they would look at something like Viking helmet guy, someone like that, right,
Mm-hmm.
and say, yeah, this guy is feeling resentment because he's been told he was a self-governor, and he's clearly, it turns out he's not, and that's kind of been a lie and a rigged game, and now he's upset, right? Or go to like Occupy Wall Street guy or whatever, right? Okay. And in each case, like you had this resentment because they were told, right, that they were self-governors, and it turns out it looks like our lives are actually run, right, by these oligarchs, right?
Right.
And I think Plato, one thing, he's going to say, well, why did you tell them they could govern themselves in the first place? Right? It's like, what? That was a mistake. Like,
your first mistake was your last mistake, friends.
Yeah. Okay. Now, and I'm not saying, right, that like that's right. Okay, but there is this assumption that like the individual human being, just by showing up, can shoulder the epistemic burden of knowing what's best, right? That there is no there's no bell curve when it comes to knowing what's best.
Yeah.
Right. And that runs absolutely contrary, completely 100%, right, to the classical tradition of philosophy, whether we like it or not.
Right. 100%. Right. And like, look, this is what philosophy does, my friends. Like, if you're not challenging all assumptions, you're not a philosopher.
Not doing it.
Including all the assumptions you were brought up with. All the religious assumptions or not. All the political assumptions, all the cultural assumptions. If you're not challenging, like, because only philosophy can challenge all assumptions, right? Everything else comes with assumptions. All of science comes with assumptions that it cannot examine or justify. So the one discipline that can challenge all assumptions is philosophy. So if you're not doing that, you're just not doing philosophy, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, just back to Callum here. I mean, like, again, I mean, to understand political philosophy, if we think that the nature of political philosophy is to well order the affairs of men, we need to understand what a human is, what perfects them, what makes them excellent, right? And I would say the people who get this best to me are the Thomistic personalists, right? Which were deeply influential for me, precisely because I thought they got it so well best. And they also get the relational and communal aspects of humans, right? So like they're trying to show that the two kind of predominant streams of thought in political philosophy today, radical individualism and collectivism, why both of those are inherently wrong, because they have philosophical anthropology wrong. It's because you don't understand what a human being is that you've been led into these grotesque errors, right? So it's sort of a diagnosis from philosophical anthropology into political philosophy, right? Which is exactly Jim's point, right? You can't just do these things in isolation. Excellent. Good questions. Callum has a follow-up. Do you see any helpful or strong developments amongst the scholastics on political philosophy? I guess I just gave one of them. Thomistic personalism. I mean, Jacques Maritain, hugely influential for, Declaration of Human Rights and stuff like that. So like there's good philosophy in a lot of stuff in contemporary political philosophy and science from scholastics and Thomistic thinkers. It's just
McIntyre.
Yeah, McIntyre. We can just argue how seriously it's been taken or how well it's been implemented or anything like that. Yeah, McIntyre and Maritain, the two being M's for me, for sure.
And by the way, they're gonna have very different views of all that too, right?
Yeah, they do, right? Callum says, has the transition to the philosophy channel officially happened? It's getting there. This is one of the first exclusives, so we'll still kind of do joint streams for a little bit, but it's going to be more and more philosophy exclusives here until the party is all here, philosophy-wise, my friends. Jar Laxel, if I'm pronouncing that right, says 10 philosophical mistakes is great. Currently rereading it. Adler does an amazing job of simply, concisely, and clearly summing up Kant. No easy task. Your definition of objective as simply existing outside the mind, along with Adler, helped idealism finally really click for me. But I've always wondered, how do we go from Kantian agnosticism to Hegel telling us exactly what the thing in itself is like? Jim, why don't you take the first whack at all that?
I mean, that's pretty big. I don't know if I can do that responsibly.
This one. We should save this for a general Q&A one.
We'll do a Hegel thing at some point, but but also like a couple of things to say there. I mean, and maybe the question, the person who posed the question has done this, but I mean, Adler's book is a good book, but how do you know that he does a good job of concisely summarizing Kant's position till you've actually taken up Kant? You know what I mean? Like these are starting points. You know what I mean? Like by all means, start with that sort of book, but then you've got to go out there and actually.
You got to read the thing itself. Yeah.
Yeah. If philosophy is about questioning all like even our most cherished things, it might even be like you have to question your own sources at some point here, right?
Yeah.
And actually get at it.
So I mean, Adler definitely falls on the Thomistic side that is like pretty heavy-handed in the criticism of Kant and Locke. I mean, he's even harder on Locke than he is on Kant in that book. And he grants a decent amount to Kant, but he grants almost nothing to Locke. And I'm like, I think he's spot on. But there's many Thomists who are actually quite friendly to Kant. Thomists that were big influences to me, or at least took Kant in a like a real serious way, like
Gavin and me, right?
Gavin, Lonergan, right? Lonergan, hugely. So
not the word influence, but
yeah.
And the reason I raised this is because I don't think it's fair to like think about like a criticism of Kant based on what a popular secondary source is saying about him. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think we can only look at this as like directly. If we're going to criticize Kant, then I think we need to look at Kant, right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you might well come to the same conclusions as Adler, but the point is actually, do what Adler says, right? Adler is the guy who gives you the great books list, right?
Yeah.
Read them.
Yeah.
Read them all, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, the guy who is saying this is Adler.
Right. Yeah.
That thing's a primer, right, to the other stuff, right? Also, by the way, like you, Gavin, and I had a pretty good episode on this.
Yes, we did. And it challenged my assumptions about Kant in ways. And I obviously have directly engaged Kant. Yeah. And I've told you, I told you one of the first conversations we have is like, man, I've always had a difficult time getting Kant straight, right? He's not an easy guy to read. He's just not. Right. Some philosophers are, right? But Kant is notoriously difficult, and I still find him notoriously difficult.
It's notoriously difficult. And I'll say this is my view: is I think the Kantian system remains incomplete. It is essentially incomplete, and that's why Hegel had to happen, right? Okay, and stuff like that. But and also like the way like objective for Kant, to say objective existed outside of the mind is to beg the question against Kant, right?
Yeah,
because Kant is trying to give you an account of objectivity that eschews that inside-outside distinction, right?
And this is like the great debate between the noumena and the phenomena, right? And like how do we read this, right? Because there's one reading, I would say it's the mainstream reading, which seems like almost absolutely idiotic to the point like it's almost hard to believe this is what Kant was arguing because it's so obviously not something that could be sustained, right?
Yep.
And then, but here's my position on that. It's like, if something is this obviously problematic, and we don't want to think that Kant was a complete idiot, maybe, which even if you disagree with Kant, you probably don't want to think he's a complete idiot.
Right.
Maybe there's a different reading of this, right? Yes. I think that's always the kind of assumption you should give a philosopher, right? Like if you can critique their entire system with an objection that a third grader could have come up with, right? Then maybe they did think that. Maybe they did. But your job as a philosopher, and I'm not, by the way, Jar, this isn't about you. This is general, about you, right? This is not you. We're just ranting now.
You asked a good question.
Sorry. Your job as a philosopher is to say, how can I make this as strong as possible?
Right.
How can I make this as strong as possible? And I say that not just respect to Kant, but I mean, like, this is the problem that, like, huge with like new atheists and Aquinas, right? And we know they're wrong about their interpretations of Aquinas, but like it never occurred to them to think that like obviously Aquinas is a hugely significant historical thinker. He was not an idiot, even if it was wrong. So like maybe your second grade level objection just isn't relevant. Maybe.
Right.
Maybe. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyways. Getting triggered again.
Here we go.
We'll do one or two more here, guys. This is a lot of fun. Calum says, do you guys think there's a complete lack of self-awareness nowadays on ethics?
I'm not quite sure what you mean.
It's an interesting. Oh, he says amongst political and social commentators. Like against the talking heads, I mean, there's definitely obviously like very little, I think, critical reflection. Or just assumption probing on any of the stuff,
or even serious training,
or even serious training. 100%.
Yeah, I agree. So
across the board.
Across the board.
Republicans, Democrats, all of this stuff, right? Yep. Now, I might agree with some people more than others, but I think across the board, again, I think the issue is a lack. This is what I'm trying to impress on my confirmation students right now. Is like you have every assumption, examine it, probe every single assumption, right? Some might be good assumptions, but hey, then we'll know they're good assumptions, right?
Yep.
But if you're not examining assumptions, you're just not doing good philosophy, right? Sweet, man. Fun jam sesh, Jim, as I knew it would be. Yeah. Any final thoughts here before we wrap this sucker up?
Nope. Stay tuned for Marcuse.
Yeah. Let's go, Brandon. And
let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's get some likes and shares on this. Please leave comments afterwards.
If you don't like it, you don't share it, we're not going to get canceled. So please,
yeah, help end this miserable project.
help end it. Right. And get back to my wife and kids.
and yeah, stay tuned for Marcuse.
I might save my marriage if you get us kids.
Marcuse is coming up next, guys.
Marcuse is coming up
next time. Peace.